President-elect Donald Trump getting out of the city this weekend, going over to the Trump National Golf Course in Bedminster, New Jersey. That's where he's going to have his meeting with Mitt Romney and continue deliberations as he forms a cabinet. We're joined today by Trump Transition Senior Advisor Kellyanne Conway. Kellyanne, let's talk a little bit about what's been going on with the idea of a Romney meeting, bringing in outsiders. Now, Romney was such a critic of Donald Trump from the start, as you well know. And the specific point of interest to me is Russia, where he clearly, even during his run against President Obama, said, you know, Russia remains our #1 foe. On the other hand, you have Donald Trump, and Donald Trump, as well as Mike Flynn, who's now going to be his national security advisor, as well as Paul Manafort, who was over at the campaign, all have very strong positive relations, not only with Russia, but with Russian Prime Minister Vladimir Putin.
That's not true.
No?
How do you know that?
Oh,
no. Is that a question?
Yes.
If it's a question, the answer is no.
Okay.
And as a pollster would say, strongly so. There's no indication that any of these people have a strong relationship. But look, what candidate Trump made very clear in the debates and otherwise, Juan, is that if there is a way to work with Russia on things that matter to both countries, we'll do it. So, for example, if they want to help us defeat radical Islamic terrorism, which Hillary Clinton refers to as our determined enemies rather than radical Islamic terrorism or savage murderers, which is what they are, then sure, we'll explore that. But I took with great note what President Obama said yesterday. He said, and right there in front of Angela Merkel, that he hopes President-elect Trump, as president, will find ways to push back on Russia when necessary, and then also to, I think he used sort of very 36,000-foot level terms, but also find a way to work with them and be cooperative when appropriate. So I think President Obama went further in his advice to President-elect Trump than he has even as president when it goes with Russia. But I have to say too, talk about the campaign still going on and people still being very partisan about Donald Trump's election. That was one of the talking points used against Donald Trump all through the campaign, is that he has these ties to Russia and the Russian hackers and Vladimir Putin is his BFF. There was no evidence that, and you know what, the American people rejected it. It just wasn't important to them. They didn't believe it, or they just said, it's one of the many things you're telling me is important to me as a voter that's not important to me as a voter.
All right, Dana.
Well, I have several questions. One of them, I'm excited about the policy side of things as to what could happen in the next 2 years. I am the resident nerd of the show.
Here.
So I'm curious what, if any, because you guys have to prioritize. You have a lot going on. You're forming a government. But how much input can you have, or are you having, on the lame duck session of Congress that's about to happen? Because there's some things, government business that needs to get done. And it's been amazing to see Republicans on Capitol Hill all come together. So I was curious if there's any news on that front.
Well, President-elect Trump speaks regularly with Leader McConnell and Speaker Ryan and other members of the conference in both chambers. But at the same time, we know there's already a president in office, and he has to deal with
finish
it out, even in lame duck. But look, the next president, Donald Trump, will inherit big messes all the way across the board, domestically, internationally. And I think it's important that the Congress now at least take stock of what President Trump says he would do in the first 100 days and see how that squares with what they're doing in the next 8 weeks.
Right.
And really sort of prime the pump that way. Because divided government, the excuse of divided government is over. They have the one-party controls, and it'll be much like it was for President Obama at the beginning of his 2 terms, Dana, where he had a democratically controlled House. He chose to do certain things with them. They then lost everything not nailed to the ground in the 2010 elections. And so I just predict that Donald Trump, given how transactional and how successful he is as a businessman, he will want to do things, big things, very quickly.
All right,
and
so
he'll need legislative support.
We're going to try to pick up the pace a little bit, Gregory.
Wow. That's nice.
I'm not insulting.
Okay, don't be. All right, I'm going to use a mediocre analogy. Imagine that you're going out with somebody, and that person dumps you, and then that person has second thoughts, calls you up and asks you out, and you say, sure. You go out with that person just to rub their faces in it. Isn't that what President-elect Trump is doing to Ted Cruz and Mitt Romney? He's inviting them over just to rub their faces in it.
Oh, boy.
No, of course not. But we're glad they came to him. And
there you go.
No, of course not. He is taking the counsel of, in this case, a very popular member of the conservative grassroots movement, Ted Cruz.
Right.
Oh yeah, no, that's not
Very
close.
popular.
And then
the other one.
and then Mitt Romney. But Governor Romney, again, as I said, look, Governor Romney and Donald Trump are the two most recent Republican presidential nominees. It takes courage to run for president. One was successful, one was not successful, but they'll have good things to talk about. And look, you know, everybody forgets what Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton said about each other. Hello, in 2008, he said she'll say anything to get elected, and then turned around and made her his Secretary of State.
Well,
so maybe if that's the criterion.
You worked with Senator Cruz.
I did.
And I mean, it was pretty bitter between those two. So you were.
I
willing
did, but Senator Cruz called me the day after the election, and he had said, I mean, he came and endorsed Donald Trump before that and stuck with him in that last month or so, when others did not, and others did not, like Joe Heck and Kelly Ayotte, who the Senate candidates who said that they weren't sticking with Donald Trump lost their races.
I'm losing time.
But they want to help.
I got two more wonderful people here.
I'm just curious, because you do know Ted Cruz well, and you know Mitt Romney. What positions do you think they might be suited for? You know, obviously Cruz was rumored potentially to be in consideration for Attorney General. The other one was Supreme Court, and then Mitt Romney, you've heard Secretary of State floated, amongst other things.
We have long, short lists for every position, Kimberly. But at the same time, I don't think every meeting needs to lead to a position, an appointed position. And I believe Senator Cruz and Governor Romney, whether they have a formal or informal position in this administration, they have much to contribute to the conversation, and I'm just very happy to see that they will be.
Eric Bowen.
So I can't give up. I mean, the people, the Never Trumpers that I fought over the last year and a half, who were, and that titular head of the Never Trumpers, Mitt Romney, I got to say, that was a lot. It's blowing my mind, but I'll get over it, because Donald Trump sees, look, he was a transition artist.
But at least he's Governor Romney.
He was a change artist. He took the Olympics from negative to profitable.
Yeah.
I get that. Can I just ask you this very quickly? The national security briefings, this is a big deal.
Yes.
How's the president-elect handling the new information?
And the vice president-elect also is in on those briefings. Fabulously. I mean, he knows it's private, it's confidential, it's serious stuff. He's listening. I find Donald Trump to be an excellent listener and an excellent learner. He makes his own decisions. That campaign was his voice, his choice. He was the messenger. Those were his messages. But people would be astonished, and I think very heartened, Eric, to see what a great listener he is among those around him. And I've seen that on full display since he was elected. I am not in his national security briefings, but I know that they're taken very seriously. And I think the public should respect the fact that any commander-in-chief and president should not be divulging what they learn there.
By the way, we have to go, but I understand he's going to settle the Trump U lawsuit, and was that your advice? Yes.
I'm happy that he's doing it, but it was not my advice. I stopped practicing law a long time ago. I'm a happy person.
Yeah, but you're an advisor.